When I asked why he unilaterally made a family card for his in-laws, Robert laughed and said, "Because they're my family, of course they should have a family card, right? Got a problem with that? If you knew who took you in when you were all alone, you wouldn't be able to say such things, would you?" I was taken aback by his arrogant tone, which I had never heard before. Was Robert always this kind of person? "If you're grateful, you should do more for my family. Then I'll acknowledge you as part of the family. Until then, it's like you're on a provisional license." I had never heard of such a thing as a provisional phase in marriage. Robert pressed further, seeing me silent. "In other words, you're not yet a formal member of the family. If you don't like it, you can leave any time, okay? For now, our family is just the 5 of us. Useless parasites, out." Understood. After I immediately canceled all our joint credit cards and moved out. My name is Emily Wilder. 27 years old. I'm a freelance illustrator. I used to work as a designer for a major advertising agency, but I went independent 2 years ago when I got married, and now I work from home. My parents died in an accident when I was young. I was taken in by my maternal grandparents, but when I went to college, I moved back to the apartment near the city center where I lived with my parents, and I've been living there ever since. I met my husband, Robert, at the Italian restaurant where he worked. It was a place with a nice atmosphere, reasonable prices, and good food, so my colleagues and I started stopping by frequently. That's when Robert, the handsome waiter, became a topic of conversation. Robert was indeed good-looking. The manager once laughingly said that a good percentage of the regulars came for Robert, and it was easy to see why. I won't deny that I became one of Robert's fans because I thought he was cool. He was that much of a standout. However, for some reason, we rapidly grew closer, and before I knew it, we were being called a couple, and to my surprise, we ended up getting married. I don't remember much about that time. It's almost like I was drunk, and when I sobered up, there was a man I was calling my husband next to me. But even so, I loved Robert at that time and was happy. When I got married, I quit the company where I had been working as a designer and went independent. It was an amicable resignation, transferring the work I had been doing at the company to a freelance basis. Robert continued working at the Italian restaurant, with different working hours each day, sometimes late into the night. It became a bit difficult to keep working as usual, and I had always wanted to go independent, so I decided to take the plunge. "It's a good idea, Emily. It'll be easier on you, and it's good to keep doing the work you love." Robert agreed, and that's how our newlywed life started. We both didn't like flashy things, so we decided not to have a wedding ceremony and just register our marriage, meeting each other's families for a face-to-face greeting. Robert went to work, and I worked and did household chores at home. Our schedules were irregular, but we kept in touch and waited for each other to come home for meals. It was a happy and fun everyday life, and I thought, marriage is nice. But about a year after getting married, Robert suddenly said this, and everything fell apart. "My family wants to come over, is that okay?" he asked. Of course, I said it was fine. I had only met and briefly talked to Robert's family during our initial greeting, so I thought this would be a chance to get to know them better. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always admired Robert's large family. But when his family of 4 arrived, I was left speechless. "Hey, which room is mine?" his sister asked as soon as she entered our house. Robert's sister, 32 years old, was 5 years older than both Robert and me, and I had heard she worked at a local supermarket. I was shocked by her rude manner, so different from the polite greeting she had given me when we first met. Robert's 18-year-old sister was also there, but in contrast, she didn't say a word and just stood there silently. I remember. She barely spoke when we first met for greetings. Hastened by Robert's sister, I showed the 2 sisters to the guest room, and Robert's parents to the room, which used to be my parents' room. It was the only Japanese-style room in the apartment, so I thought it would be best for them. After settling into their rooms, Robert's sister declared, "Well, since we're going to be living here together, you better start serving our family properly." I was confused by what she meant, but when I looked at Robert for help, he was laughing in a way I had never seen before. It turned out his family had given up their own home and moved into my apartment without my knowledge. Sorry, apparently our family home suddenly had to be vacated, and they had nowhere to go, he explained. I wish he had told me earlier, as I had assumed it was just for a day or two, and this was really inconvenient. When I mentioned this to Robert, trying not to upset him, he looked down and apologized. Anyway, please just until they find somewhere else to go. I couldn't say no. How could I turn away people in need, especially the family of someone important to me, without even a place to go? I reluctantly agreed to live together, on the condition that they find a new place as soon as possible. But I would come to regret this decision. Robert's family showed no restraint. All four of them, from the day they moved in, did nothing and left everything to me, saying whatever they wanted. They made no effort to look for a house or a job. When I asked about their jobs, I was in for another surprise. Oh, I quit that lousy supermarket job. She had said she was employed, but apparently, it was just part-time work. I had assumed she was a full-time employee due to her age, but she revealed she hadn't had a steady job since high school. Robert's parents were also in part-time jobs and had quit before coming here. And, of course, Robert's sister was unemployed. She had said she was a student, but that was a lie. Why should I work when I've become part of a wealthy family? A wealthy family? Who was she talking about? When I asked, I got another shocking reply. You, of course. You got a big settlement and insurance money from your parents' accident, and you don't even have a mortgage on this apartment. You can live without working. Robert's sister said, laughing. I protested to Robert when he got home, but he raised his voice in a way I had never seen before. Everyone's tired from suddenly having to leave their home. Let them rest for a while. Or do you want to cruelly kick out my family, Emily? Stunned, I froze. Then Robert suddenly softened his tone. Sorry for yelling. I'm having a tough time too. I've been busy and tired today. Can you understand? Just a little more patience, please. Robert was good at handling women. Looking back, he probably always used a mix of kindness and harshness to get his way with women. But at that moment, I didn't realize it and reluctantly agreed to endure a little longer. And the tyranny of Robert's family got worse. They treated me like a servant when at home and demanded money when going out. We can't go job hunting without a penny, can we? It's fine, but if we can't find work, we'll just keep living here. I reluctantly gave them some money, which of course they claimed to have spent without finding a job. They probably never looked for work. But if I said that, they would accuse me of lying without proof, and Robert's whole family would blame me for hours. Telling Robert didn't solve the problem. Everyone's frustrated about not finding jobs. Sorry, just bear with it a little longer. I'll talk to them, Robert said, trying to smooth things over. But as time went on, I felt like saying anything was pointless. However, the frequency of them asking for money gradually decreased, perhaps because Robert said something, so the issue seemed to resolve itself. Of course, the money I had given them was never returned. Then, after about 3 months of living this way, I noticed something alarming. Why is the credit card bill so high? Could it be unauthorized use? When I quickly checked the statement, all the charges were made with family credit cards. The purchases ranged from food and drinks to books, games, and even expensive brand bags and clothes. Each item was labeled with a number from 1 to 5, indicating that 5 family credit cards had been issued. Currently, these credit cards are in my name, with Robert using the family cards. It seemed like you'd be better at handling this, and it's more convenient to consolidate payments, right? Can I leave it to you? He said, and I ended up managing them. But it seemed these family cards had been issued without my knowledge. Robert's family stopped asking for money because they could now make credit card payments and cash withdrawals. When I confronted Robert about why he made family cards for his in-laws without asking me, he laughed and said, Well, you complain when they say they have no money, so what choice do I have? Besides, you know who took you in when you were all alone, right? Can you really say such things to the important family of your benefactor? I was stunned into silence by his arrogant tone, unlike anything I had heard before. Was Robert always like this? If you're grateful, you should serve my family more. Then I'll acknowledge you as family too. Until then, consider it like you're on a provisional license. I had never heard of a provisional phase in marriage. Noticing my silence, Robert pressed further. This means you're not yet an official family member. If you don't like it, you can leave any time, you know? Right now, it's just the 5 of us in our family. Useless parasites, get out. That's when I realized Robert's true nature. I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body, shocked. I considered divorcing Robert. In fact, I began to wonder why I married Robert in the first place. Initially, I just thought he was a handsome guy. Like the other girls, I was just excited about him being handsome, without any particular intent. Then one time, when I left to go to the restroom, Robert approached me. You seem different from other people, Emily? Huh? I don't know how to put it, mystical? Sorry, it's not something I should say to a customer. I was taken aback. That continued, and I gradually started to notice Robert. Maybe that was his strategy to make me like him. Thinking about it calmly, it started to make sense. I remember, when Robert came to our table for small talk, a colleague jokingly said I was a wealthy heiress living alone in a condo. It was right after that he started talking to me. Probably, he was after my wealth and this condo. Robert wasn't really my type. To put it nicely, he was modern. To put it bluntly, he seemed somewhat frivolous. I liked mature men who could talk quietly and seriously, but I ended up falling for Robert. I always found that strange. Robert was the so-called handsome guy. It must have been easy for him to charm a woman, especially someone like me, not used to men and newly into the workforce. I fell for his tactics and ended up marrying him. The thought made me so frustrated and embarrassed, I felt like destroying everything in the house. But I wasn't foolish enough to act on that impulse. I decided to get revenge, somehow. For that, I needed to endure this life a little longer. Like Robert manipulated me, I would control his entire family. The condo we live in was bought by my father with a mortgage soon after I was born. It wasn't very expensive back then, but the area developed rapidly with a new shopping center nearby, and now it's considered a luxury condo. My parents, hoping for more children, bought a spacious condo. That's why there's enough room even with Robert's family moving in. But even with its decent size, having Robert's family around is a nuisance for me, working from home. I'm enduring this only for the sake of revenge. As Robert's sister said, there's no mortgage payment for this condo. When I was 3, both of my parents passed away. In a car accident. They died on their way back from my paternal grandfather's funeral, after colliding with a speeding car on the freeway. That day, I was supposed to go with them, but I had caught the flu that's going around and had a high fever. So, my maternal grandparents came to the condo where we lived with my parents to take care of me, leaving me as the only one who survived. The mortgage payments were covered by the group credit life insurance. So the only housing costs I pay are the management fees and property taxes. Robert, seeing the amount, said he would contribute just a bit more than that to our household expenses. There's no mortgage, so if I put in that much, we should manage Emily's income, right? We'll each use our own earnings for personal expenses. Sounds good, doesn't it? I agreed, thinking maybe he was right. Until then, I had been paying for everything by myself, so I thought his contribution would lighten my load. Looking back, it was foolish, but at the time, I was blinded by my love for Robert and just went along with whatever he said. Robert probably thinks he's the head of the household and the one supporting me. Which is why he can so easily call me a parasite. But in reality, it's different. I pay for most of the expenses like utilities, food, social expenses, and entertainment. And now, 5 real parasites had been added to my household, making it impossible to manage with just that amount. I wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible, but I pretended not to notice and endured. I gritted my teeth and let Robert's family freely shop, reminding myself that I'll be the one laughing in the end, to get through these tough times. Then, 3 months after deciding to divorce, the day to act finally came. I'm tired. Please decide, it's either me or your family. I told Robert, presenting him with a final decision. He was surprised, but I continued without concern. None of your family members lift a finger to help around the house, they just dump all their chores on me. You know I work from home, I'm not just playing around. Yet, they treat me like a freeloader and tell me to know my place since you're supporting me. I've had enough. I cried as I confronted Robert. He looked at me, smirked, and said, Then you should leave. Didn't I tell you before? You're not really a part of this family yet. Giving up like this means you didn't earn your place in the family. I pretended to be shocked as I looked at Robert. What are you surprised about? If you can't live with my family, then you're the one who has to leave. Oh, and since I'm not at fault, I'll take this apartment as alimony. And I'll take half of your savings as part of the property division. Ah, so that was his aim all along. That's why his whole family kept harassing me, trying to drive me out. I knew it, but hearing it outright was still a shock. It was someone I once loved and even married. But thanks to this, I made up my mind. Fine, I said, deciding to divorce Robert. But this condo is mine. And I'm not at fault either. What did you say? The reason for the divorce is you allowing your family to live with us without consulting me, and your family ignoring me. I said it firmly to Robert. He seemed shocked that I outright rejected his proposal, not expecting such a response. It made sense, as I had always complied with his demands since our marriage. Thinking back on it, it made me angry. I don't want to spend another second with you all, so I'll leave now, but you should also prepare to leave. It's a joke, right? This is our home, we won't leave. Ever heard of residential rights? You can't just force people out who live here. Robert shouted. Ignoring his ranting, I left the house and went to my grandparents' place. I explained everything and asked if I could stay until things were settled. My grandparents were shocked to learn what I had gone through and scolded me for not consulting them earlier, tears in their eyes. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm sorry for worrying you. But I'll be okay now. You know, I might look docile, but I'm not really. I said with forced laughter, tears in my eyes. The day after I left the apartment, Robert contacted me right away. Hey, what's this all about? What are you referring to? The certified mail. I was impressed by the quick work. I had left the divorce proceedings to a lawyer, and when I told them yesterday that I was leaving the house, they arranged for everything to be delivered today. I'm not paying any alimony, and I'm not leaving the condo, just so you know. Robert declared. But legally, you have an obligation to pay, and you don't have the right to continue living in that apartment, I responded. What are you talking about? That apartment is mine too, since we're married. If you insist, then pay me half its value to buy me out. Such an absurd claim. Talking like this is getting us nowhere. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on. I said, ending the call. I knew he would probably call again tomorrow, but I had no desire to talk anymore today. As expected, he called the next morning. Hey, what's this all about? He repeated the same line as yesterday. No creativity at all. What are you referring to? The card's not working, what did you do? What I did was cancel it. That card was mine, and you were just using the family card, remember? Indeed, before leaving the house, I had switched all the contracts from that card to another and canceled it. Of course, the family cards would stop working when I cancel mine. I was paying for it, too. Yes, you paid the apartment's management fee and property taxes. Just for the first 2 months. It's not much, but I can deduct that from the alimony if you like. When I mocked him like that, I heard some indistinct shouting from the other end of the phone. That's right, Robert only paid the agreed amount for just 2 months. He made various excuses about the store and whatnot, always finding a reason to ask me to wait, but then he stopped paying altogether. If he forgot and thought he was still paying, that's some poor memory. But I didn't care anymore. He's someone I'm cutting ties with, his memory doesn't matter to me. That's the situation, so please pay your half of the living expenses I've been covering. I've kept a detailed household ledger, which I'll submit as evidence. Then divide the savings properly. It's marital property, he demanded. Yes, I understand. Let's split it accordingly. I agreed, and he ended the call with a parting shot, reminding me not to forget. Hey, what's that all about? Then, a few days later, I got another call with the same line. I realized they lacked not only memory but vocabulary as well. What do you mean? The split of shared property. Why is it 0? You must be rolling in cash from your parents' insurance and alimony. Ah, so that's what they were thinking. I patiently explained that my savings before marriage weren't part of the shared property, and since we had no savings after marriage, it naturally amounted to 0. Don't lie to me. If you think I'm lying, why don't you consult with someone? Anyway, from now on, please communicate through my attorney. I won't be speaking to you directly anymore. Goodbye. I said that, hung up the phone, and blocked Robert's number. 2 months after I left the house, Robert and his family finally moved out of the apartment. Not because they had a change of heart, but because they couldn't sustain their living. Naturally, Robert's income alone wasn't enough for a family of 5. They were used to shopping extravagantly with my card, telling them to cut back now was impossible. I had let them use the card intentionally for this. Knowing them, I was sure it would come to this. His family started pestering Robert for shopping money, and when he refused, they began stealing from his wallet. Even when Robert got mad, they blamed him for kicking me out. To top it off, the electricity, gas, and water were all shut off. Of course, I had arranged for that, since I had no plans to live there for a while. Robert tried to get them restored immediately over the phone, but the house was in my name. No one else could get them reconnected if the owner had them stopped. During the hot summer and early fall, his family couldn't bear the extreme heat and eventually left the condo. Where they went, I neither know nor care. Robert tried to stay till the end, but eventually gave up due to the lack of electricity and the inability to bathe. The divorce proceedings went faster than expected. Not because Robert had a change of heart, but because he messed up. He cheated on me while we were still married. Or rather, he had started making moves on someone thinking he could kick me out soon. He bragged about owning a luxury apartment in a prime location downtown, luring young girls there. It's surprising he did this while his family was around, but he had a history of such behavior, so they didn't mind. He was handsome, so I suspected he might do such things. Before leaving, I had installed cameras in several places in the house, which captured all the evidence. Maybe he underestimated me, but he really did disrespect me. He brought his family into my home without my permission, made a family card and left me the bill, kicked me out, and cheated on me. I demanded a hefty sum in alimony for all these. When Robert saw the amount, he turned pale and desperately pleaded for reconciliation, but I had no such intentions. Knowing he couldn't pay, I made him borrow as much as possible from his company and took whatever I could get. When I threatened to sue him for fraud over the family card, he reluctantly agreed to my terms. Well, I hope he does his best to pay off his debt. The divorce is finalized, and I'm still staying at my grandparents' place. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. I might sell it. I treasured it because my parents left it to me, but since they passed away when I was very young and I have no memories of them, plus all this has happened, I think they'd understand if I let it go. My work as an illustrator is picking up. I might live alone again, but it's a good time for that. I can work just fine staying at my grandparents'. I'll depend on them a little longer, then move forward with strength. Next time, I won't be fooled by a man who's only good-looking. I hope to find a partner I can share my life with. Both of your parents didn't even finish high school. Cut ties with such low-life parents immediately. My husband, whom I had always thought of as kind and dependable, began to scorn and belittle me the moment he found out my parents were middle school dropouts. I was taken aback and saddened by his sudden change in behavior, which came as a complete shock. My name is Julie Sutherland, a 33-year-old working housewife. I live with my 1-year-older husband, Tom, and our 4-year-old child, leading a busy life. As for my job, I work at a company run by my parents. I respect my parents for building their own business, and since I was young, I've been interested in their work. I was delighted when I got a job after thoroughly learning. So when Tom suggested I become a full-time housewife after we got married, I insisted on continuing my work. At that time, Tom respected my wishes, which made me very happy. We had a love marriage, and initially, we supported each other without any issues. Even when we had differing opinions, we would resolve them amicably and respect each other's views. Until then, I felt happy to have married a good man. However, at one point, Tom found out my parents were middle school dropouts and started to deride them. My parents' company may be small, but Tom had admired it until he started complaining just because they didn't have high school diplomas. What does it matter if they didn't finish high school? Why do you suddenly care about that? No matter their educational background, my parents currently have the ability to run a company. Education is important, sure, but it shouldn't be the only measure of a person. Up until then, Tom had built a good relationship with my parents, so I pleaded with him not to judge them solely on their educational attainment. But Tom couldn't accept my perspective and seemed displeased with me for defending them. Dropouts are no good, right? Don't associate with such parents. He even went as far as telling me to cut off my relationship with them. Without reconsidering his grudge against people without a high school diploma, Tom became even more stubborn and our relationship worsened. Moreover, from this time on, he began to strongly insist that I quit my job. Especially after our child was born, he started saying it even more frequently. Quit your job already and focus on the housework. But you used to say it was fine for me to continue working. My husband, who had once respected my decision, had now become pushy with his selfish ideas. Since he wasn't like this before, I was confused and sad but kept trying to convince him, hoping he would understand. However, no matter how many times I explained my reasons for wanting to keep working and the benefits it brought to our family, he consistently told me to quit. He seemed to truly believe quitting was for my benefit, belittling my desire to work. As a result, our once peaceful life, where we used to help each other, turned into days filled with endless arguments. The quarrels continued, and Tom's insults about my job and my parents increased, chilling our marital relationship. My parents had expressed a wish to celebrate our child's birthdays and graduation ceremonies together if possible, but my husband vehemently refused with harsh words. Furthermore, he wouldn't listen to me and would unilaterally decide on plans, which led me to consider divorce. Then, one day, Tom came home in high spirits because his promotion was confirmed. With the salary increase, he told me to quit my job. With my pay raise, you don't need to work, right? Just quit and take care of the home. Since he started telling me to quit my job, Tom stopped doing any housework he used to help with. Probably he was hoping I'd quit if the housework suffered. But I continued with the housework as usual and stood my ground when he used it as an excuse for me to quit. Although he claimed he was telling me to quit to reduce my burden, he didn't move a muscle to help with housework and childcare. His attitude only made my love for him grow colder. Now, seeing I wouldn't change even with housework as a reason, he was using money as the new argument. Indeed, we could live comfortably on Tom's salary alone without me working. Even considering our children's future, we can afford to live comfortably, so I didn't need to work forcibly. But I want to work. Ever since I was a kid, I watched my parents work with such vitality, and I've lived wanting to try my hand at their jobs. Working at my parents' company has always been a dream of mine. And when I actually started working there, far from being satisfied, I found myself wanting to work there even more, feeling it as my calling in life. That's why I've been pushing so hard to balance housework and my job, so of course, I won't quit. I've said it over and over, I love my job. So I'm not gonna quit, I told him firmly. My husband just laughed at me as if I was a joke, opposing the idea. A woman's place is taking care of the home, isn't it? Besides, a poor company like that will go under in no time. He mocked with an outdated view, belittling my parents' company. True, my parents' company is small and the building is old. But that doesn't mean the work we do is laughable. My parents' business is community-oriented, well-regarded by the locals, and cherished by its employees. I take pride in my parents and the company they've built, and I absolutely don't want to cave into my husband's demands. Annoyed at my husband for demeaning my parents and their company, I reiterated that I wouldn't quit my job. Then he brought up our kids as a reason. You're always at work, barely involved with the kids. You should become a stay-at-home mom and be there for them. He argued. I really don't want to hear that from you, I retorted. After work and on weekends, I make sure to spend time with our children. In contrast, my husband prioritizes his hobbies at home and seldom pays attention to the kids. Come to think of it, if he doesn't do housework or participate in childcare, what's the point of him being around? I've noticed that the kids barely react to my husband, who doesn't pay much attention to them, creating a vicious cycle. Reflecting on it, he has never really acted the way a father should. A man says in the back, you know. He'd say with a smug smile when pointing out my supposed lack of involvement with the kids. A father who only pursues his hobbies and constantly complains when at home, is he really necessary? Thinking this over, I've become more aware of the possibility of divorce. And the next morning, despite his complaints for me to quit my job, I ignored him and went to work. Though irritated with his mindset and attitude, my focus is now on work. Arriving at the office, I was ready to switch gears and give my best at work when unexpectedly, the president asked to see me in the reception room. Puzzled, I went to find a stern-looking man seated across from my father. It was clear from my father's expression that he was extremely upset. As I wondered what the matter could be, my father asked me to listen first. This concerns you too, Julie. I'm sorry, but could we go over it from the beginning? At my father's behest, the man across from him started speaking. The man, named Mr. Smith, had been the assistant project leader on a joint project with my father's company. The original leader hardly visited the site and gave almost no direction, so essentially, Mr. Smith was leading. The project was about constructing and designing a new store in collaboration with my father's company. The new store's concept matched well with the reputation of my father's company's buildings, which had an old-fashioned, comforting feel. So, they approached my father's company, and everything was going smoothly without any issues. But just as they were about to start the construction work, the leader abruptly decided to go with another company, snatching away the plans. This project was a major deal, and a significant amount of money had already been involved, so my father was understandably angry. Mr. Smith tried to salvage the situation, but the leader had already sabotaged him. He had falsified Mr. Smith's work hours and performance, leading to a false accusation at his company. Because of this, Mr. Smith was removed from the project, putting it in jeopardy. Other team members protested, but to no avail. So, today's visit was to apologize for the project coming to a standstill. After hearing them out, I realized I wasn't involved in this project. So, I was left wondering why I had been called here when Mr. Smith, already looking quite pale, turned even more apologetic. My father also turned a pained, sorry look my way. It's a tough truth for you to hear, he began. The shocking news was that the no-good leader in question was my husband. Normally, one might get mad and deny it if told their spouse was up to such things, but given my husband's usual behavior, I was more inclined to believe it. Actually, I even thought it might be a good reason to go ahead with a divorce I was considering. And it turns out he was still causing trouble. Then, both men, looking quite distressed, shared another fact with me. The leader had placed a young woman in the now vacant assistant leader spot. The two of them were seen together so often that it sparked rumors within the company of an affair. Are you saying they might be having an affair? But it's just a rumor, right? Despite my disbelief that my husband could be cheating, I had to ask for clarification, to which Mr. Smith regretfully confirmed. While we can't say for sure it's an affair, they often dine together and are seen alone a lot, so it's almost certain. Apparently, many employees had witnessed my husband in private rooms with this young woman and out and about together. Their behavior suggests it's more than just being work associates. The two of them spoke hesitantly, considering my feelings. Especially, my father had a troubled expression. My father knew how happy I seemed before and at the beginning of my marriage. Back then, I was all about loving my husband, so it must have been tough for him to break this news. But now, I've already got a reason for divorce, and to be honest, I'm even somewhat relieved, so the news of my husband's affair doesn't hit me hard. Don't worry about it. Things haven't been working out between us for a while, and I'm actually considering a divorce, I reassured them. When I mentioned my upbeat attitude about the divorce, my father looked shocked. If the affair is really happening, then I'll definitely be going after a fair amount of alimony, I said with a smile, and Mr. Smith seemed to regain some of his spirits. Actually, I'm thinking of reporting to the company what the leader of this project's team has been doing. If things go well, I believe we can continue with this plan. These words seemed to give my father some energy back. The three of us then started brainstorming a plan to bring my husband down. Fueled by all the demeaning and complaining I've endured from him, and now his cheating, I was fired up to give him a taste of his own medicine, contributing plenty of ideas. And behind the scenes, while my husband went about his usual business, we were making preparations in secret. We planned to keep him in the dark until the last possible moment before confronting him all at once. At the company, Mr. Smith led the effort to gather evidence of my husband's tampered reports and to prove that the project he claimed as his own wasn't actually his work. We had all the prep work and research for the project proposal on hand, and since my husband hadn't attended the meetings, the meeting minutes proved it. We submitted all this evidence along with a letter of protest from the entire team, and the company decided to conduct a factual check before giving my husband a chance to explain. As for me, I hired a private investigator to look into the affair. While waiting for the results, I tried checking his personal belongings. When I looked up infidelity countermeasures on the internet, it seemed that people who were cheating were often found out because they had items that hinted at the existence of someone else. So I decided to take a look through his bag, coat pockets, and dresser drawers to see if I could find anything. Thinking the more evidence of the affair, the better, I searched carefully without his knowledge but found nothing that seemed like proof of infidelity. I had expected to find women's items or telling receipts, but there was nothing, not a trace of another woman. This made me half suspect that the affair was just the imagination of the witnesses. But later on, when I saw the investigation results, it was clear my husband was indeed guilty. There were photos of my husband with a younger woman looking intimate, arm in arm, and even entering and exiting a hotel together. With my mind already set on divorce, I thought this was almost convenient. I realized then that I had no lingering feelings for him. Since I no longer regretted the decision to divorce him, I started packing my things so I could leave the house at any time and was waiting for the right moment to tell him. Meanwhile, my husband, oblivious to everything, was in a good mood about a potential promotion, persistently telling me to quit my job and continuing to belittle my parents. I kept responding as usual until one day, he lost his temper in a way I'd never seen before. "You really won't listen to me. You always put your parents first. We're married, you should be prioritizing your husband," he shouted. But it's his fault for belittling my parents and dumping all the housework and childcare on me without lifting a finger to help. How am I supposed to rely on someone who's too busy to help when I ask? I almost sighed out of frustration at my do-nothing husband who only complains. Plus, he never listens during discussions, just gets angry when things don't go his way. Quick to anger and quick to insult my folks. Who would stand by such a partner? He wasn't like this in the early days of our marriage. I feel sad thinking about how things used to be. Up until now, I tried not to be too harsh with him because we were living together, but with divorce on my mind, I didn't hold back. "Then maybe you should finally stop bad-mouthing my parents. And you just dump all the housework and childcare on me. What kind of husband are you?" And with that, I confronted him directly for the first time. Not liking my stance one bit, my husband turned even redder with anger. "Shut up. Listen here, Don't ever bring your parents to any family functions again. We're married, I won't even allow you to contact them. If you don't like it, then it's divorce, he yelled. My husband, disliking my defiant attitude, threatened me with divorce as if to intimidate me. He thought I would be afraid of divorcing him, which just made me feel dumbfounded. Despite him never really acting like a husband, I wondered how he could say such things with so much confidence. Though I was internally rolling my eyes, I kept a solemn face and asked him, "Are you okay with that?" When he mentioned divorce, I felt a surge of relief inside, thinking I could easily get one, but I kept a serious face as I sought confirmation. Perhaps thinking I was distressed by the idea, he looked a bit smug as he replied, "Yeah, you'd be lost without me. I'm quite the catch, but who'd look twice at a stubborn and dull woman like you?" He seemed to think that I would be unable to fend for myself after the divorce. And even went on to mock my age and personality, suggesting I wouldn't be able to remarry. Facing his gloating smile, I calmly showed him the completed divorce papers. "Understood. Then please sign the divorce papers." "What? Are you serious? You'd be in trouble without me, right?" Shocked that I was considering divorce, he asked again, as if still trying to intimidate me. I retorted, loaded with all the frustration I'd accumulated. "Life is easier without you around. It's exhausting to be with someone who does nothing but complain. It's better not to have someone who doesn't help out with the family and just struts around. Life would clearly be more enjoyable without him, so I'd prefer it if he were gone." His displeasure at my seemingly happy reaction to the divorce only made him angrier. "I'd be better off without you too." In response to my words, he hastily signed the divorce form. The next early morning, I took the kids and the divorce papers, packed our bags, and left the house. I had already informed my parents the day before, so we immediately went to their place. They had been made aware of my intention to divorce, so everything was set up for us to live there, and we were able to move without any panic. That day, my husband not only lost the promotion he had been looking forward to but also his affluent lifestyle. Upon arriving at work, he was promptly called into the conference room, where he was confronted about the allegations Mr. Smith and the others had raised. In the conference room were the team members who had accused him and the young female employee rumored to have had an affair with him. "What's this all about, all of a sudden?" he asked, thinking it was a work-related discussion until he realized there was an auditor present, which rattled him. He was questioned about the project and his work behavior, and though confused, he tried to bluff. "What are you talking about? This plan is definitely my work. Stop with these baseless accusations." "But you can explain the details of this project plan, right?" However, with the evidence Mr. Smith and I had compiled, he couldn't explain the project plan he had claimed as his own. It was no surprise since he hadn't created it nor had he reviewed the content thoroughly. When questioned about the project plan, he couldn't explain anything, whereas Mr. Smith could respond perfectly. Therefore, he couldn't prove that he hadn't stolen the credit and found no way out of his predicament. He was told that his promotion was off the table, and although he protested angrily, he was not taken seriously. Then, he was further grilled about the affair, and the confrontation with the young female employee ensued. She hadn't been briefed about the meeting and quickly slipped up. "He said he'd give me favorable treatment in my job if I went along with it. I knew he was married, so I thought it was just part of my job." She claimed she had been reluctantly involved with him because he had forced her. Now, she began to play the victim, trying to shift all the blame onto my husband. "Don't spout nonsense. You're trying to make me the bad guy all by yourself." My husband shouted back in anger, eventually lashing out with accusations about how she had been the one pursuing him. They both made wild claims against each other, which apparently turned into quite the argument. But thanks to the investigation results from the detective agency I had commissioned, neither could deny the affair. They were both deemed to have character issues that rendered them unreliable for their positions. My husband was demoted to a windowside position as a regular employee. And his salary was reduced to the point where he could barely afford to live on his own. His misconduct ensured that he would never be able to rise through the ranks at that company again. Someone who doesn't take their job seriously and just steals their subordinates' accomplishments shouldn't be able to get promoted. Moreover, my husband had been slacking off, never really putting in the effort at work to be considered excellent. He had a good front, and initially, some people seemed to be on his side, but once the evidence of his wrongdoing came to light, people quickly distanced themselves from him. This made his workplace environment uncomfortable, and with his past misdeeds, he found himself in a tough spot to find a new job, leaving him clinging to his windowside position. Furthermore, since I had hired a lawyer, I was able to demand alimony and child support from him. As we hadn't settled property distribution and other details yet, I hadn't filed the divorce papers at this point. And the alimony was set at $60,000. Additionally, child support was decided at $1,000 per month. The alimony was higher because of the verbal abuse I routinely received from my husband. Since deciding on divorce, I had recorded these instances, which contributed to the larger amount. As for the division of assets, there was no issue with the house since it was a rental, and it was decided not to split our savings. Since our marriage, my husband had been spending money on his hobbies and affairs with women, and my savings were more substantial, which is why I made this choice. When I contacted my ex-husband about the alimony and child support, he resisted paying such a large sum.
"A kid needs their father. Let's get back together,"
he suggested, probably thinking there was still hope since the divorce papers hadn't been filed yet. When he pressured me for reconciliation, which made me feel uncomfortable, I declined, and he ended up accusing me of being after his money. Facing his threatening tone, I calmly informed him that I was recording the conversation and that any further threats would just increase the alimony. After going that far, my ex-husband finally calmed down and agreed to pay, and he stopped contacting me afterward. Of course, I also demanded alimony from his mistress, and since she was younger, I heard that the alimony payment wiped out her savings. She had become an assistant leader but was demoted to a regular employee and had her pay cut. Rumors of her affair made it uncomfortable for her at the company, and it seems she resigned shortly after. Thanks to the hard work of Mr. Smith and his team, the company's transactions could proceed without any issues, bringing peace to both my marriage life and the company's operations. Despite trying not to care before, the condescending remarks from my ex-husband's parents and the belittling voices were indeed stressful, and I have felt a refreshing sense of liberation since the divorce. My husband seemed to think it's pitiful for a woman not to be able to remarry, but I don't feel that way. My children, too, haven't shown any sadness about their father's absence. Instead, they seem to laugh more at home than they used to. Observing my children's happiness, I'm confident that divorcing was the right call, and lighter in spirit, I dedicate myself to work and parenting today.
Help! Actually, my parents.
Yesterday, I was run over by a car driven by my mother-in-law and rushed to the hospital. After the surgery, while I was resting, my husband called.
"After you were taken away yesterday, the police came. I told them you were startled by the car and fell. But now they're saying someone saw Mom run you over."
Summarizing my husband's excited rambling, it seems both my in-laws were taken to the police station. I was indeed injured by my mother-in-law driving the car yesterday. Yet, both the person who ran me over and my father-in-law, who was in the passenger seat, lied in their testimony. My husband had orchestrated it, making it seem like I fell and got injured. I was dumbfounded for a while.
"Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain that it was just a fall."
That's the first thing he says to me after I was rushed to the hospital? My anger reached its limit, and I decided to take revenge on my husband and in-laws. They must think I'll always do as they wish, but that won't happen. Then it struck me. Yes, this will surely prove I was run over by my mother-in-law. In pain, I reached for my phone again. My name is Emma, I'm 50 years old. Since marrying, I've been a homemaker. I met my husband, Hayden, in my 20s, a typical office romance. He was assigned to look after me when I joined the company. He wasn't particularly handsome or appealing to women. Naturally, I had no romantic feelings for him. I never saw him as more than a colleague, just diligently following his instructions every day. However, working together, he took a keen interest in me. I thought he was just happy to have a subordinate close to his age, but gradually realized it was more than that. Initially reluctant, I started feeling good about being flattered every day. Thinking back, I don't know what I saw in him. But I fell for his sweet talk, and we started dating. We worked together for a while, and about a year later, he proposed. Having no reason to refuse, I accepted. Convincing myself this was what life was about, I started a new chapter. At my husband's behest, I quit my job and, without discussion, started living at his parents' house. I had visited my in-laws a few times before marrying, but never imagined living with them. They were warm and welcoming on those few occasions, which reassured me. By that time, my father-in-law had retired, so I spent my days with them while my husband was at work. There was no sweet newlywed life. It was nothing like I had imagined. At first, they seemed somewhat considerate, but their attitude towards me changed over time. My mother-in-law's demands grew day by day, crushing my spirit.
You're able to be a homemaker thanks to Hayden, so you better be perfect at housework.
Whenever something slightly displeased her, she would eagerly scold me. She never doubted her mission to educate the imperfect daughter-in-law, which seemed to be her life's purpose. She lived with her mother-in-law too and often bored me with stories of back in my day. Times and values have changed. Being forced to accept her outdated mindset was nothing but a nuisance. But due to my position, I had no choice but to silently endure her constant nagging. She often went to a cafe with her friends of the same age, where they seemingly enjoyed bashing their daughters-in-law. Oddly enough, they didn't brag about how great their daughters-in-law were, but rather competed over who had the worst one. Hearing these stories made me wonder if I would end up like them, filling me with dread. As for my father-in-law, he wasn't exactly supportive either. Although he didn't antagonize me like my mother-in-law, he complained about my cooking almost daily.
The seasoning is too strong today. Are you trying to get rid of the elderly quickly?
His old-fashioned attitude, viewing women as inferior, was evident. Whenever the topic comes up, he keeps saying how women should be. That women should be considerate and assist men, or that they should understand things without being told. It's embarrassingly idealistic. I guess some people never change, always acting high and mighty no matter their age. My father-in-law doesn't exactly pick on me. He's more about boasting his beliefs to me, proud of his outdated thinking. He'll probably never realize his mistakes and just keep getting older like this. They're just like those unpleasant in-laws you see in dramas. I've tried discussing it with my husband several times, but he always gives vague responses. Instead, as our marriage has gotten longer, he started blaming me.
My parents are elderly, you should be kinder to them. Isn't that what a daughter-in-law should do?
Like father, like son. Following in his parents' footsteps, my husband also started to look down on and exploit me. He doesn't help with anything when he comes home, just sits there as if it's the most natural thing. Maybe things would have been different if we had kids, but we never had any. I went to the hospital for infertility treatments until my late 30s, but the dream never came true. Right after we got married, my in-laws were always pressuring me about when they would see a grandchild. It's not entirely my fault. Children are a blessing. It's ridiculous to think about having a baby just for my in-laws. I figured there was no need to force it, so I gave up when I turned 40. In this less than happy life, there were people who supported me. The couple who lived across the street. Juliana and Kyle lived together without any children. Kyle's mother had lived with her mother-in-law and she didn't want to cause the same trouble, so he refused to live together. Juliana was there for me during my infertility struggles and even listened to my complaints about my in-laws. My in-laws and husband are all about appearances, so Juliana was initially surprised.
I thought your husband was a nice guy. It's a bit off-putting that he's still not independent from his parents at his age.
Thanks to Juliana, I managed to get through life without getting too overwhelmed. My mother-in-law, over 75, still drives herself when going out. It looks dangerous, and I've warned my husband, but he doesn't listen. If I suggest she should give up her driver's license, he explodes, "Are you calling my mom an idiot?" He gets furious, thinking I'm insulting his mother. I tried talking to my mother-in-law too, but she still thinks she's young. Are you treating me like an old lady? You're really unpleasant, she says, getting as angry as my husband. I was worried something terrible might happen, and it did, but not in the way I expected. That day, as usual, I walked to the nearby supermarket. Without a driver's license, walking is mostly how I get around. I thought about getting a license after starting a job, but I got married sooner than expected. When I discussed it with my husband, he was against it, saying, "I can drive, so you don't need it." On sale days, I end up with too much to carry, but there's no way I can ask my husband or mother-in-law for a ride. My husband, who used to happily offer a ride when we were younger, now just scoffs and refuses. I was carrying heavy bags and had just gotten back home when I noticed. The garage door was open. Did she say she was going out today? My mother-in-law hadn't mentioned anything when I left the house. Well, never mind, I thought, passing the garage to head to the front door, when suddenly a car roared out of the garage at high speed.
Oh!
It was the only silly thing I could utter in surprise. The next moment, the car hit me without slowing down. It threw me backward by the impact and groceries tumbled from my bags. In that position, my body slammed into the asphalt. Dazed, not understanding what happened, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head from the impact. I couldn't get up. All I could do was lie there, looking up at the sky. How long had passed when I realized Juliana was looking down at me?
Hang in there! I've called an ambulance, everything's gonna be okay.
Juliana's face, speaking to me, was pale and strained. I wondered if things had gotten that serious. A naive question crossed my mind. As I moved my aching head slightly, I could see blood flowing from it. Seeing this, I began to understand the gravity of my situation. I started to realize the seriousness of the situation. But there was nothing I could do, unable to move. Soon, I could hear the ambulance siren getting closer.
Just a little longer. They're almost here, hang on.
As I listened to Juliana's desperate encouragement, my head started to feel fuzzy.
No, no. Just a little longer.
Despite her words, I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was lying on a hospital bed. A tube 4 was connected to my hand, and I could see the fluid dripping continuously. Realizing I was saved, tears naturally flowed. Moving my head slightly brought sharp pain. It was no wonder, given the bleeding.
Ugh!
As I groaned in bed, a nurse rushed over.
You shouldn't move your head yet.
I had many questions, but listened silently to the nurse's explanation. It had been 1 day since the accident. I was rushed to the hospital by the emergency team called by Juliana. After arriving, I underwent surgery to stitch up my head and survived. Juliana had stayed with me the whole time, and now she had returned home as it was past visiting hours. It seemed she had contacted my husband Hayden too, but after telling him the surgery was successful, he didn't say anything else. My whole body was in pain, but there was no life-threatening injury. I just needed to rest for a while. However, I didn't feel like doing anything. With so many things to think about, I just closed my eyes. Soon after, my phone on the bedside table started ringing insistently. I didn't want to answer, but the calls persisted. After several repeats, it seemed there was no sign of giving up. I found my phone without moving my head and saw Hayden on the screen. Thinking he must be worried, I answered with a slight relief.
Help! Actually, my parents.
Hayden started speaking without giving me a chance to talk.
After you were taken away yesterday, the police came. I told them you were startled by the car and fell. But now they're saying someone saw Mom run you over.
Summarizing my husband's frantic story, it seems both of my in-laws had been taken to the police station. Indeed, I was injured by a car driven by my mother-in-law. Yet, she and my father-in-law, who was in the passenger seat, had lied. Even Hayden had instructed them to agree that I had fallen and got hurt. I was dumbfounded for a while.
Fortunately, the car wasn't damaged. Dad wasn't hurt, but Mom seemed to have twisted her neck from the collision. Despite that, poor them, the police are being so one-sided.
He was more concerned about the car and his parents, oblivious to my shock. How rotten can this family be? Since picking up the phone, has he said even one word of concern for me? No, nothing. He was only worried about his parents, taken to the police, and even wanted me to prove their innocence.
Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain it was just a fall.
The number you have dialed is currently. He was talking to me one-sidedly, but he was surprised by my first response.
Huh?
I cut off the call. Calls from Hayden continued for a while, but I, infuriated, set my phone to reject his calls. I later learned that my in-laws had been taken to the police station, just as my husband had said on the phone. Sometime later, my husband Hayden was also taken to the police station where my in-laws were waiting. It was Juliana, our neighbor, who had seen everything unfold. She was the one who had originally called the police about my mother-in-law's crime. After accompanying me in the ambulance, she handled various procedures in place of Hayden. She was questioned by the police officers who arrived at the scene. It seems her questioning happened after they had already spoken to my in-laws, serving as a sort of corroboration of the story. Juliana noticed the accident when she heard a loud noise outside. Looking out her window, she saw me lying on the street. And she hurriedly called an ambulance before rushing out. By that time, my mother-in-law's car was gone, and it wasn't clear what had happened. Juliana was more concerned about my safety than finding the cause. When questioned, she told the truth. However, my in-laws immediately denied any suggestion by the police that I had been hit by a car. Sensing something was off, Juliana kept thinking even after the police officer left. After ensuring my surgery was complete, she returned home and discussed the incident with her husband Kyle. Then Kyle came up with an unexpected solution.
The car's dashcam, it records 24/7. The accident happened right in front of our car, it must have caught everything.
They checked the camera in their car together.
Just as I thought.
True to Kyle's hunch, the moment of my accident was recorded. The footage unmistakably showed my mother-in-law hitting me with her car. After I fell, my father-in-law peeked out of the car window before they drove away. It was a clear hit and run. Armed with the footage of my in-laws' crime, they went to the police station. They were able to prove that I hadn't simply fallen and injured myself. The police, having heard from Juliana, immediately questioned my in-laws. Despite the video evidence, my in-laws were reluctant to admit their guilt.
That video is a setup. Someone is trying to frame me. Officer, please, you can't put an old lady like me in jail, right?
Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law were embarrassingly adamant in denying the crime. Eventually, my mother-in-law admitted guilt, claiming she was instructed to hide the truth by her son. Indeed, Hayden had told his parents to align their stories. But I questioned my mother-in-law's sanity for betraying her own son to save herself. My father-in-law, perhaps tired from the interrogation, admitted that he was in the passenger seat but had fled without helping me. When the police interrogated Hayden, he also struggled to admit his involvement. Then a detective came to my hospital room.
Your parents both say they were instructed by their son to cover up the accident. At first, they lied through their teeth, but this seems to be the truth.
Perhaps feeling sorry for my ordeal, the detective spoke with evident regret. They inspected the car but found no major damage. If Hayden had repaired any damage to the car, it would have been considered evidence tampering. However, Hayden wisely decided against it. Since then, I haven't seen Hayden at all and have lost all affection for him. I told the detective about the phone call. He then said that at that time he had instructed his parents to keep their mouths shut. The detective sighed deeply after hearing this.
I don't know what to say. I can only imagine how you feel.
He sympathized with me, someone who had been betrayed by her family after suffering a serious injury requiring surgery. After a while of heavy silence, the detective bowed deeply and left the room. A few days later, when I was about to be discharged from the hospital, the police contacted me again. Juliana, who had come to pick me up in place of Hayden, drove me straight to the station. The detective from the previous day greeted us. It turned out he was the same one who had heard Juliana's story, and he led us inside. In the room, we were met with the gaunt figures of Hayden and my in-laws.
Emma.
My mother-in-law, upon seeing me enter the room guided by the detective, suddenly began to tear up. I thought it was insincere, but she seemed genuinely crying. Whether she felt relieved to see a family member or was relieved to see me alive, hoping for a lighter sentence, I couldn't tell. We waited for my mother-in-law to calm down before beginning. A female officer soothed her, and she finally seemed ready to talk. My father-in-law, sitting next to her, looked utterly exhausted and kept repeating "I'm sorry" to me. The specific purpose of the day was to align the details of the accident with me, the victim, present. The screen displayed the footage of the accident submitted by Juliana. While watching it, the detective proceeded to discuss each detail. My in-laws answered the questions honestly, and I nodded in agreement, confirming the facts. The main issue was whether my husband Hayden was involved. Following my statement, his call history had been checked, which proved he had called me. However, even now, Hayden continued to deny any involvement. I, unfortunately, hadn't recorded the content of our call, so the conversation wasn't progressing.
Are you trying to frame me too, you liar?
At times, the detective calmed Hayden, who became emotional and appeared agitated. Please stop. Lying any further will only lead to your regret.
Do you want to betray your own mother and father to save yourself?
My warnings fell on deaf ears. Feeling an impasse, the detective spoke up.
So, your parents are continuing to lie to the police, is that correct?
With that question, Hayden fell silent. My words carried a different weight.
Your mother running over your wife is clearly captured on the video, which both of your parents have admitted to. But according to you, your parents, out of self-preservation, are implicating you as an accomplice.
The detective's serious tone made Hayden's face tense.
Do you understand? The crimes of your parents are becoming even more serious.
Hearing this, Hayden finally admitted his guilt. At the very end, he realized the gravity of his actions. With Hayden's confession, all three were fully exposed. Police officers in the room started moving around hurriedly.
Regarding this matter,
the detective then turned to me, discussing whether I wanted to withdraw the complaint. While the crimes committed by the three couldn't be erased, this decision would significantly alter their fate. However, I firmly declined.
I was lucky to survive, but their decision to flee the scene right after the accident is unforgivable. I'll be filing a complaint to ensure they pay for their crimes.
My decision caused a significant stir among them. My mother-in-law cried out loud, and both my father-in-law and Hayden slumped in despair. They probably never imagined I would make such a ruthless decision. They all believed themselves to be good spouses, a good mother-in-law, and a good father-in-law, assuming I would naturally forgive them. Had they handled the situation properly after the accident, it wouldn't have come to this. But my in-laws chose to protect themselves over my life. Hayden prioritized his parents' and public image over his wife's life. I want them to reflect on the gravity of their actions and duly pay for their crimes. I stood up silently and left the room. Accompanied by Juliana, I started the paperwork in a separate room. Living with my in-laws and Hayden for years. It would be a lie if I said that it doesn't hurt my heart. Above all, I was the one most hurt. Even if my physical injuries heal, this trauma will follow me for life. Despite not having done anything wrong, I felt far from relieved. By the time we left the police station, it was already dark. Juliana, thoughtful as always, invited me to a celebratory dinner for my discharge. I gratefully accepted her invitation and headed to Juliana's home. Warmly welcomed by Juliana and Kyle, we enjoyed a meal together. For the first time in a long while, I laughed. They treated me as usual, with care and kindness. Even though my in-laws and Hayden were no longer in my life, I was now on my own, with legal proceedings and other tasks ahead. It felt overwhelming. But at that moment, I chose to forget all that and genuinely enjoyed myself. The morning after that pleasant night, I decided to divorce Hayden. There was no need to keep tormenting myself. Hayden seemed a bit chastened by the whole ordeal, but I realized I couldn't love him anymore. I immediately contacted a lawyer and brought up the subject of divorce with Hayden. At first, he seemed surprised, but soon he agreed, seemingly understanding the situation. I couldn't bear to see Hayden's pathetic state any longer, so I left everything else to my lawyer. The three of them faced criminal charges, and in addition, they were ordered to pay me a settlement. Since the divorce was largely Hayden's fault, I received a significant amount in alimony. I decided to leave my in-laws' house and rented an apartment with the money I received. I had planned to start anew in a distant place, but I chose to stay in the familiar town. There is a reason I didn't move away. Juliana's husband, Kyle, owned a company. He invited me to help out at his company. Juliana was also helping there, and I thought it would be nice to work together. I had been invited before but always declined, fearing what my in-laws or Hayden might say. Honestly, with the alimony I received, I didn't need to work anymore. But Juliana and Kyle were concerned about me. Suddenly being alone, they gave me a sense of purpose. Having spent decades as a housewife, working with friends was very enjoyable. There were many new things that confused me, but it became a significant part of my life. And so, with this new life, an unexpected encounter awaited me. I met a man through work and decided to remarry. I had told him about my divorce, but kept quiet about the alimony until we got married. He didn't blame me for it. "It's natural to be cautious after what you've been through," he said with a smile. My life changed drastically in my middle years. Perhaps more fulfilling and happier than my younger years. I was betrayed and hurt by someone I trusted for many years, but I found greater happiness that surpassed it. Grateful to the friends who always reached out to me, I began walking towards a brighter future. My name is Emily Johnson. I've been married for 5 years and have a 3-year-old daughter. My husband, Ken, is dedicated to his work and never takes a day off, even when he's feeling under the weather. Thanks to him, we're able to live a peaceful life. I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me. She got married about 3 years ago, but they had trouble having children for a while. Both my husband and I were worried about her as she seemed a bit down. Then, she shared the news that she was pregnant. From that point on, my husband and I supported her throughout her pregnancy. When we heard the baby was born, we went to the hospital. Her husband, Steve, was there too, looking overjoyed. "Oh, where's the baby?" That was the first thing my husband said as we entered the room. Indeed, there was no baby beside my sister. That's right. The hospital staff takes care of the baby in the nursery, thinking the mom might be exhausted. They only bring the baby for feeding times, she explained. Wow, that sounds convenient. The food is great, and they take care of everything. I'm really glad we chose this hospital. Maybe I should have our second child here too. Wait, you're planning to have another baby? Well, I don't want our child to be an only child, I replied, looking at my husband. But he didn't seem to be listening. His attention was entirely on my sister. Samantha really did a great job. She carried the baby for 9 months, and I've seen how hard it was for her. I just feel nothing but gratitude. My sister's husband, Steve, is a business owner. Because of this, he's always been busy with work and couldn't take much care of my sister. It must have been so stressful for her, hardly ever seeing her husband despite having one. That's true. You were rarely by Samantha's side. I suddenly felt a bit surprised by these words. It sounded like a subtle critique of Steve. I'm sorry. It's just been work, and I couldn't do anything about it. No matter how busy you are with work, you should be there for your wife during her pregnancy. It's going to get even tougher with raising a child. He says this, but when it was my turn, he just left everything to me. Something's not right. Samantha really did a great job. It must have been tough for her. My husband says, thinking of my sister. I appreciate his concern, but I can't help feeling uneasy. As we were talking, it was time for feeding, and the baby came out of the nursery. Everyone's eyes were on the baby, carried by the nurse. My husband smiled as he saw the baby,
Steve did the same, but it seemed more than that. Why? He wasn't this happy when I gave birth. He didn't show such emotion, but now it's like he's seeing his own child. He didn't even show this much emotion for our own daughter, hardly coming to the hospital because of work. And when he did, it was long after the birth and he didn't visit again until we left the hospital. I thought, doesn't he want to see his own child, even if he's busy? While other moms had dads coming by every day, taking pictures of the kids and laughing together, in our house, that kind of scene was completely absent. But what about my husband now? He's acting almost like a husband to Samantha. Taking Steve's place even though Steve is right there. While watching my husband, I remembered something. It started long before I knew Samantha was pregnant. When Steve said he had to work late, so did my husband, and when Steve went on a business trip, so did my husband, always coincidentally at the same time. When both of our husbands were away on business trips, I suggested going out with Samantha, but she always declined, saying she was busy. Maybe she wanted to spend time chatting with friends without her husband around? I thought so. But my husband was unusually kind to me during these times. He would bring home sweets he normally wouldn't buy, and if I said my shoulders were sore, he would massage them. But it never went beyond a shoulder rub. I dismissed my suspicions as overthinking. But seeing the two of them in front of me brought them back. I kept repeating in my mind that something was off. Isn't he drinking well? My husband said. Samantha didn't try to hide and breastfed openly. Steve frowned at this sight. Understandably not wanting to show his wife's breast to even his brother-in-law. But my husband looked on happily, quite naturally. Isn't it normal to feel embarrassed or look away? Am I the only one who thinks this way? My husband commented as he watched the baby drink milk. Is this child a boy or a girl? I realized I hadn't asked the gender. It's a boy. A boy, huh? He's gonna be a heartthrob when he grows up. My husband said, looking pleased. Did he want a boy that much? But at that moment, what slipped out of my mouth was, yeah. He looks just like you. Eh? The air felt like it froze. But it was my husband who broke the silence. Ridiculous! What are you saying? He can't look like me. Right, there's no way that could be. Really? I think they look very similar, especially around the eyes. No way! Don't say weird things. Oh, really? The two of them denied it outright, but they looked incredibly suspicious to me. Steve looked even more intently at the child's face, clearly deep in thought. After that, my husband's late returns continued. You're late often. What are you doing out there? With nothing but suspicion, I asked him. And he answered without any guilt. I go to see Samantha and the baby. Oh, aren't you busy with work? Yeah, I am. And you still find time to go there? You never helped with our child, always saying you had work. Our child is a girl. Samantha's is a boy. That's a big difference. He goes there because it's a boy? That's a strange reason. Aren't you tiring Samantha out by visiting so often? No way. She's always happy to see me. That Samantha? Don't speak ill of Samantha. My husband got surprisingly defensive. Still, I thought he wouldn't visit as often once Samantha was discharged. But that wasn't the case, he apparently went there almost every day. Did you go to see Samantha's baby again today? Yeah, I have to see him every day. They grow up so fast at this stage. But you never showed such interest in our own child's growth. Well, even if it's not my kid, it's my sister-in-law's, so it's natural to be interested. You're the weird one for not wanting to see him. Really? I still think you're going too often. Are you jealous? That's pathetic. It's strange not to want to see a child that my sister-in-law struggled to give birth to. As he justified his actions, I couldn't help but lose trust in him when I saw lipstick on his shirt and his pants worn inside out. He's cheating, isn't he? But who with? Is he saying he's going to Samantha's but meeting another woman? Or is the affair with Samantha herself? No, he couldn't be that monstrous, could he?
Every angle I consider always leads back to suspicion about Samantha. I felt like I was losing my mind. That's when I got a call from Steve, Samantha's husband. "Hey, Emily, can we talk? I need some time with you." His voice sounded serious, so I went to the agreed-upon place. "Sorry to make you come all this way. I thought it would be bad if Ken were at your place." "So, does Steve also have the same suspicions as me?" "The thing is, there's something odd about Samantha. Not just her, but Ken too."
Ken too? What do you mean?
"Well, it's been happening since she was in the hospital, but after she got discharged, Ken's been coming over to our house. Every time I get home, he's there. At first, I was happy thinking he really cared for our child, but it feels like more than that.
Like what?
When I get home, I can feel a momentary distance between them, a kind of forced aloofness. I asked Samantha why Ken comes over every day, and she says it's just to see the baby. But when I follow Ken's gaze, it always lands on Samantha. I wouldn't mind if he really just loved the child and came to visit, but it doesn't feel that way." So Steve noticed too. I just listened without responding as Steve continued. "Recently, he even comes over on days when I'm off work." I didn't know that. I had assumed Ken was working on weekends. "And when I'm not looking, well, you know." I understand what he means. "He's so good with the baby. I thought it's because he's experienced as a father." But the truth is, Ken has never changed a diaper. Or even fed our child a bottle. He'd make a face if I asked. But the other day, I overheard their conversation when I went to another room. It seemed like Ken was changing the diaper but did it wrong. "No, not like that. You're so clumsy." "Sorry, Samantha, I'll get better at this." Their voices sounded too intimate. They must be in a relationship. I hate to think this as a man, but I can't shake off the suspicion. Do you feel the same, Emily? How could I not?
I'm pretty sure your hunch is right, but without proof, there's no point in suspecting.
Yeah, I guess so.
So why not hire a detective? I'll pay half.
A detective?
Yeah. Let them investigate, and if they find nothing, that's fine.
Sounds good. So we hired a detective to gather evidence of their affair. About a week later, a large envelope arrived from the detective agency. The contents were as expected. I was so unsurprised that I just thought, bingo. But now, there's a lot I need to do. I immediately contacted Steve and set a plan in motion. Then, a week later, on a weekend, I visited Samantha's house with Ken.
"Emily, did you come to see the baby?"
"That's rare.
Ken often visits, but I thought you weren't interested since you never come."
The baby's sleeping right now."
"Is that so?"
"Let's go in." As we moved to the living room, there was Steve. He nodded slightly when he saw me, but to an outsider, it looked like a simple greeting. "Coffee okay?"
"Ken, you'll have coffee, right?"
"Yeah, I'll help make it."
"Oh, then let me do it."
"No need, Steve. Just sit down. I can do it faster." "What does that mean? Does he know where everything is because he's been here so often?" Seeing my husband's behavior, anger welled up in me. He never makes coffee at home. He acts like if he just says coffee, it'll appear. But the voices from the kitchen sounded like a happy couple, and both Steve and I frowned. When the coffee was set on the table, Samantha started the conversation. "What brings you here today? You didn't come just to see the baby, did you?" "Right on target." "Exactly, Samantha." "That's right. Actually, I've got a wonderful gift for Samantha and Ken."
"Huh? Don't you mean for Steve and me?"
"No, it's for Samantha and Ken." Saying that, I spread out the documents sent by the detective agency on the table. There were several photos showing Ken and Samantha together. The report detailed what the two were doing on specific dates and times.
"What is this? What's going on? Having an affair, huh?" Perfect, just as planned. The two were utterly shocked.
Ken, what's this about? Well, it's just.
I thought Ken would confess right away.
We're just getting along as in-laws. What's wrong with that?
No, the problem is the way you're getting along. The photos clearly show intimate scenes, like leaning on each other's shoulders or embracing.
Just look. In this photo, we're just leaning in to look at the baby. And here, it looks like we're hugging, but really. Oh yeah, a cockroach scared Samantha, so she clung to me.
Such blatant lies. With all these photos, how could he expect anyone to believe these stories?
And why would you do such an investigation? Don't you trust your own brother and sister?
No, I don't.
I care for your sister as if she's my own, and now you suspect me? Don't you feel sorry for her?
You're the one to talk. Still lying through his teeth.
What are you saying? You say you feel sorry for your sister, but you're the one who cheated. Both of you are at fault. We didn't cheat. I just explained every photo. Still, you don't believe me?
Nobody's going to believe these made-up stories with such lovey-dovey photos.
Whether you believe it or not is up to you, but are you trying to ruin your sister-in-law's marriage?
Ken said this with a triumphant look, but Steve, finally losing his temper, pulled out an envelope labeled DNA test results.
I also suspected you and Samantha. That's why I prepared this evidence. I was going to seal it if you admitted it, but now it seems unnecessary. A DNA test? You don't believe it's your own child?
Ken's face turned pale. That's his cornered look. Samantha, meanwhile, looked down, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation.
We tested the baby's sample and a toothpick Ken used at home. And here are the results.
It read 99.9% probability of parentage.
This means, Ken, you're the father. That's strange.
I thought so.
Ken visits the baby every day, but when his own child was born, he chose work over the baby, hanging out with friends instead. But now he visits Samantha every day. It seems more like he wants to flirt with Samantha than see the baby. No! This is unbelievable!
Despite the evidence, Ken still denied it.
I have a family I love. There's no way I'd get involved with my sister-in-law.
What? Where is this loving family you speak of?
Emily. It feels like years since you've called me by my name. I love only you. There's no way I would cheat. Are you really going to believe this piece of paper over my words?
I will believe it.
I'd rather trust the power of science than the words of a crappy man. If anyone believes the words of such a man over this, that's truly unbelievable. Who are you calling crappy? No, that's not it. I really love you. I have no interest in any other woman.
That was when Samantha suddenly burst into tears. This is terrible.
What's happening?
Both Steve and I were shocked, and Ken seemed just as surprised.
What's wrong?
I love Ken, and he loves me. When I got pregnant, Ken was happy. He's been coming every day since the baby was born, and we've been in love every day. And now you choose your family over me.
Samantha, we promised not to break up our families.
Hey, Samantha, why did you do this with my husband? I've been struggling with not being able to have kids, and you and Ken were so kind to me. Ken came to my house almost every day. Steve was always busy, so Ken listened to my problems. I realized he was the one I could truly trust, and that's when I gave myself to him. Yeah, I was so happy. To have someone care so much about me, I ended up sleeping with him.
Yeah, I got caught in the hands of such a crappy guy.
Yeah. I thought it was wrong and wanted to break it off, but our physical compatibility was too good, and I couldn't do it. Samantha seemed almost pleased as she spoke. Ken, listening, looked smug. What's with these two? So, what are you planning to do now? I believe in separating marriage and love. I want to continue my married life with Steve while dating Ken. Are you a monkey? A dog? Just an animal? Even if she's my sister, I can't just agree with such a story.
Just pure foolishness. And what about you, Ken? When I turned to Ken, he was smiling happily. Ken shared the same view. For me, it's just a physical relationship with Samantha. Since we have kids together, I don't mind if we don't have a marital life anymore. Why not continue this relationship without divorcing? Wouldn't that make us all happy? Unbelievable, are their heads filled with flowers? Or maggots? This level of selfishness is almost refreshing. Steve seemed to share a similar view, only able to sigh. I definitely can't continue this relationship. I'm going to divorce. Steve agreed. Yeah, same here. I can't live with such a bitch. I'm divorcing too. Bitch? What do you mean? Oops, sorry, that just slipped out. But seriously, it's unreasonable to raise Ken's child with the money I earned. So, divorce is the only option. So, Ken, you can do whatever you want. I thought they'd be satisfied with this, but they both vehemently objected. I have no intention of divorcing. Huh? How am I supposed to live if we divorce? There it is. The epitome of selfishness. But that's true, isn't it? My salary is peanuts. I've been content with it because you, a high earner, were there. That's not true. You just depended on my salary because you hate dealing with people. Well, that's one way to put it. But if Samantha divorces Steve, her child will be fatherless. What are you talking about? The real father is right here. I don't want that. I don't want to marry Ken. I absolutely refuse to divorce Steve, who earns well, and I have no interest in low-income Ken. So, you dislike the idea of Ken prioritizing me, and you have no intention of marrying him. Such honest individuals. But I don't need to concern myself with the opinions of such self-centered people. I can't continue this relationship. Steve said that, placed the divorce papers on the table, and left the house. I did the same. I presented the prepared divorce papers. Sign these and submit them to the office. If you don't, I'll have to hire a lawyer. You can't afford a lawyer, but I can. No way! I'm not divorcing. I'm not divorcing either. If you think so, then fight it with a lawyer. Though I doubt you can. With that, I left Samantha's house, but the place I was returning to wasn't the home I shared with Ken. It was an apartment I rented immediately after receiving the detective's report. I had resolved to start a new life there with my child. After that, the two kept contacting me, causing a commotion. Finally, I hired a lawyer, and realizing they couldn't do anything, they signed the divorce papers. They probably thought that by signing, everything would end, and there would be no claims for compensation. But it's not that simple. Since I was cheated on, I wanted them to feel the same or greater pain. So, I demanded alimony and child support from Ken and compensation from Samantha. They cried a lot, but I didn't care. Steve settled by agreeing not to claim alimony in exchange for not paying child support. However, that was only towards Samantha. He claimed compensation from Ken. Samantha, unable to pay the compensation I demanded, went crying to Ken. Ken confidently assured her he'd handle it. As a result, they ended up with a huge debt. I watched as they borrowed money for both compensations from a consumer finance company and paid it. But the borrowed money had to be repaid, and they were in a dire financial situation. After the divorce, the two naturally started living together. However, with a nursing child, Samantha claimed she couldn't work, and Ken was the sole breadwinner, leading to a very difficult life. They struggled even to afford milk and diapers, and Samantha often nagged Ken to find a higher-paying job. But Ken, poor at socializing, valued interpersonal relationships over a career change. Get a part-time job if you're not going to switch jobs, Samantha would say to him daily. If I start doing part-time work, won't it affect my day job? If things stay like this, I won't even be able to produce breast milk. Then why don't you work? Emily, your sister, kept working even after having her child. Don't compare me with my sister. I've decided not to work while my child is young. A mother's presence is what's best for them. But if we don't have money, what are we supposed to do? That's why you should work. Their nightly arguments led to complaints from the neighbors. Due to this, they were unable to repay the money borrowed from consumer finance, and it eventually led to legal troubles. Neither could afford a lawyer, so they both turned to their parents for help. However, both sets of parents agreed that since they stayed together even after an affair, they should resolve their issues themselves. The daily battles continue, filled only with anger and resentment. As for me, I hit it off with Steve, my sister's ex-husband. We became good confidants and eventually realized we needed each other. Our relationship naturally developed, and we're now nurturing our feelings for one another. My daughter has grown fond of Steve too, and I'm considering living together with him in the future. Today's dinner is all Anna's favorite. I'm sure Anna will be delighted. I lay out the dishes on the table while picturing my granddaughter's happy face. As I prepare dinner, Anna's eyes also fill with sparkle. But the next moment, looking at the table lined with ingredients, Anna suddenly looked down. Look, Anna, your favorite food. Aren't you going to eat? My husband also peered at Anna's face and asked, but she suddenly got up from her seat. Then, Anna ran straight to her bag and started rummaging through it. Watching her actions curiously, she took out a Tupperware from her bag. Can I take this home? I always feel sorry for Mom. Saying this, Anna started packing the dinner into the Tupperware. We were stunned by our granddaughter's sudden behavior. What does that mean? Can you tell us? My husband Ryan asked calmly, but Anna's face darkened. Mom gets yelled at by Dad for eating. So, she's only allowed to eat leaves. Anna's unexpected words left us speechless. However, Ryan quickly stood up and left the house. I hurriedly tried to stop him. Wait, where are you going? Without changing his expression, Ryan started calling a taxi while holding Anna. Hurry up! We're going to talk to Michael right away. We immediately headed to my daughter's house in a taxi. What we saw there. My name is Susan. I worked as a childcare worker but retired when I got married. I met Ryan when I started working in my 20s. Ryan was the son of an acquaintance. He worked for a major company, seemed taciturn and unfriendly, but was competent at work. Ryan, 8 years my senior, had failed to find the right person before me. He joined the management department of his company at a young age, had excellent academic credentials, and a high income. But he was slightly difficult, rarely smiled, and was quiet. He was not good at socializing and mostly talked about work during our meetings. Still, Ryan's earnest attitude to communicate won me over gradually. He was more sensitive than I thought and caring towards others. After our arranged meeting, we began to see each other more. 3 months later, he asked me out. Our relationship deepened, and 2 years later, we married and bought a house, building a happy home. Life was fulfilling. But there was one problem. 2 years into our marriage, we were still childless. Colleagues and friends who married around the same time had children, but we did not. We both loved kids and were saddened by our situation. 5 years into our marriage. We were about to give up hope when we were blessed with our daughter, Isabel. We were overjoyed at finally being able to conceive. I remember feeling ecstatic about finally becoming parents. With Isabel's birth, our life began to shine. Everything revolved around Isabel. Even busy Ryan began to decline his colleagues' invitations, coming straight home for dinner. On his days off, we went on trips, making family time. We adored Isabel immensely. As she grew up and became a university student, she moved away from home. Isabel was still young among us, so her independence worried us. Especially Ryan, he was more worried than anyone else about her, who was living away from us for the first time. Is Isabel eating well? She's fine. She always keeps in touch. Daily photos of her meals sent by Isabel became our joy. A year after she left, Isabel called, her voice bright, wanting to introduce someone. Nervously, we met them during her long break at home. I'm dating Isabel. The well-dressed young man, Michael, came to our house. They hit it off in the same school and started dating.
Although startled by Isabel's first boyfriend, we warmed up to the friendly and cheerful Michael. Michael visited our home with Isabel several times. Since Isabel was an only child, we doted on Michael like a son. Ryan and Michael got along well, occasionally going for drinks. We bonded with Michael like a real family. After graduation, Isabel got a job in a major city. We were proud and supported her. Months later, Michael proposed. They couldn't live together due to their jobs. Wanting to stay together, Isabel agreed to marry. Isabel became a homemaker, leaving her job at Michael's request. She accepted this, quitting her new job. But we should have known more about Michael sooner. As a full-time homemaker, Isabel, supporting her family, used to visit our house about once every 6 months. Since getting married and living in the city, due to Michael's work schedule, it's been hard for Isabel to visit. Michael seems busier with work after marriage, often working late every day. Isabel told me this over our daily phone calls. Waiting up late for Michael and preparing dinner has become Isabel's job, she said. Though Michael seemed tired, Isabel's voice on the phone also sounded weary. Are you getting enough sleep? It's nice to wait for Michael, but you can't afford to get sick yourself. Isabel cheerily assured me she was fine, but recently admitted feeling a bit unwell daily. Feeling sleepy and disliking the smell of cooking, her favorite activity. I didn't have this before. Isabel sounded down about suddenly not being able to eat her favorite foods. When she spoke of her poor health, it reminded me of something. Concerned for Isabel, I suggested she visit a doctor. Initially surprised, she trusted my advice and agreed to go. I think something wonderful is going to happen to you. About a month later, Isabel called, wanting to talk. Usually, she'd schedule calls, but this sudden one surprised me. Hello? What's wrong? I asked, sounding worried. From the other end, I heard Isabel's voice, unable to contain her joy. What could have happened? Actually, I'm pregnant. Isabel excitedly shared the news and I clapped my hands. She was indeed pregnant. When she first mentioned her symptoms, I had a hunch. They were the same as when I first got pregnant with her. Apparently, she's about 2 months in and had already told Michael. I was overjoyed at my only daughter's pregnancy news. The thought of having a grandchild, of my daughter becoming a mother, was exhilarating. That night, I shared the news with Ryan, who cried with joy more than I did. Then he cried even more than me for joy. I'd never seen him cry before, it was truly surprising. Isabel becoming a mother. I can't believe it. She was so little once. Ryan said, deeply moved. I, too, felt elated. We struggled to have children, but now our beloved daughter is pregnant. With Isabel's pregnancy, we started visiting her frequently, helping out as Michael was often away for work. Isabel's morning sickness was worse than mine, and with her being pregnant, I worried about the strain. So, with Isabel and Michael's permission, I started helping with household chores. Thanks to that, Isabel, who had been struggling with morning sickness, began to recover gradually. A few months later, she safely gave birth to a girl. Michael couldn't be there, so we stayed by Isabel's side. Life seemed hectic for her after that, struggling to balance newborn care and household duties. With Michael away for work, Isabel, as a full-time homemaker, had to manage everything. As we saw her getting increasingly tired from childcare, we made a suggestion to Michael. Is it true there's a nice house available? We had told Michael about a newly built house. Ryan's acquaintance had built it but suddenly got transferred and had to sell it. With no buyers, they were just about to put it on the market when they consulted Ryan. Knowing that Isabel and her family had been considering buying a house since their marriage, and with their growing family, Ryan brought it up to them. Isabel had mentioned their current place was getting cramped, especially with Anna's arrival. We suggested to Michael that now might be a good time to buy, as it was a bargain. It meant moving a bit to the countryside, to the neighboring county, which would also make it easier for me to visit Isabel. That's what I thought too. To our surprise, Michael agreed easily, and they decided to move to the house. We helped with the move. On moving day,
I noticed Isabel looked a bit pale.
You don't look so well. Is something wrong?
Isabel hesitated but shook her head and said it was nothing. Maybe it was just the fatigue of parenting.
Don't overdo it. Moms need breaks too. Thanks, Mom. I'm okay, just a bit tired.
Isabel said with a troubled smile. I could only watch her worriedly. I wondered if she didn't like the new house, but she soon returned to her usual calm demeanor, so I didn't press it. After the move, they were closer to us. And Michael even arranged a transfer at work to be near home. Isabel started visiting more often, sometimes staying over. Anna, now walking around, had grown so much, it was hard to see any trace of the baby she once was. Each visit brought new surprises at how quickly she was growing.
Anna's gotten so big lately, it's hard to keep up with her.
Isabel sighed. It was like I was looking at my old self, and I couldn't help but smile. It reminded me of Isabel as a child, always running around. I shared these memories with Isabel, who just chuckled and asked to drop the old stories. Anna, now 3, was full of curiosity, always running off somewhere. It's amazing how fast kids grow. Grandma, let's play over here. Anna's innocent smile reminded me of when she was born. A child who was still too small to run has grown so big. It's bittersweet to see her grow so fast.
Kids grow up so quickly. Maybe you'll have a second one soon? Stop it, Mom.
As I spoke jokingly, I felt Isabel's face darkened at the comment. She gave a short reply and quickly changed the topic. Since Anna's birth, Isabel's usually cheerful demeanor seemed off. She had always laughed things off, but I had never seen her so clearly troubled. What could have happened? I tried to ask, but the conversation always moved on, making it hard to inquire. They continued visiting every couple of months. But when Anna turned 6, their visits suddenly stopped. They used to come over regularly, but recently it's been only phone calls. Isabel used to share her parenting troubles, but now her responses were curt.
I'm busy right now, sorry.
Every day ended with an abrupt hang-up from Michael, without any reason. We couldn't even see or talk to Anna, who used to visit us so often, let alone our dear daughter Isabel. No matter how much we asked for a reason, we only got nothing's wrong as an answer. Helplessly, I even tried calling Michael, but the response was just as indifferent.
Sorry, I'm busy right now. Can we talk later?
He'd say in a cold voice before hanging up, leaving me unable to get through to him. Ryan also tried calling several times after I consulted with him, but he received the same indifferent attitude.
I wonder what's going on with Isabel and her family. They used to come over so often.
Ryan said, sounding dejected, and I nodded in agreement. We felt uneasy as they suddenly stopped visiting us. However, a few days later, things changed a bit. Previously, it was Isabel who called, but now it was almost always Michael. That day, Michael called with what seemed like an update, but since I was out, Ryan answered.
Is work keeping you busy? Anna must be getting quite big now, right?
Ryan tried to make light conversation, but Michael's responses were still curt. Unable to hear from his daughter and granddaughter, Ryan lost his patience and asked Michael.
We haven't seen your faces in a while. When can we come over?
At first, Michael seemed reluctant to agree. But Ryan, not having seen Isabel and Anna for over 2 months, insisted. Michael kept saying he was too busy, but Ryan persisted, saying they would just meet briefly and leave. Then, Michael made an unexpected proposal.
The long weekend is coming up, right? I want Anna to experience staying in your place, so can she stay over by herself?
Ryan was taken aback by Michael's suggestion. I returned home at that moment and overheard Ryan on the phone, discussing letting Anna stay over alone. We looked at each other, deeply worried. The thought of our young 6-year-old granddaughter being apart from her parents made us uneasy. We tried to persuade Michael against it, arguing that Anna could learn to act independently at another time, but he was adamant. Anna is already 6 years old. She'll be fine alone. He insisted, leaving us with no more arguments. Of course, we wanted to see Anna, but we also really wanted to see our daughter Isabel.
We were concerned about Isabel, who had been lamenting the challenges of parenting, but ultimately, due to being busy with household duties, Isabel didn't come. In the end, it was decided that only Anna would stay over. While we were sad not to see Isabel, the thought of seeing Anna after so long made our hearts leap. When the long weekend started, we picked Anna at their house. As soon as she went outside from her house and saw us, she ran towards us with a big smile. "It's been a while," I greeted her.
"Grandpa, Grandma,"
Anna reported happily. We hugged her tightly, relieved and proud of her growth.
"We're so happy to see you."
Unfortunately, Isabel was out of the house when we arrived and we couldn't meet her. However, we savored the long-awaited reunion and, on our way home, stopped to buy Anna's favorite sweets. That day, we played until evening, making up for the lost time. Anna, who hadn't seen us in months, could now read and entertained us with stories from her picture books. As we prepared dinner, we cherished Anna's significant growth. Ryan bathed Anna while I prepared her favorite meals. Seeing the table set with her favorite ingredients, Anna, fresh from her bath, lit up and eagerly dug in.
"All my favorites!"
she exclaimed, clinging to the table with a smile that made me happy too. When we sat down for dinner and Anna lowered her face suddenly, I found it strange and watched her closely. Ryan, worried, spoke to her.
"Look, Anna, your favorite food. Aren't you going to eat?"
He leaned in and asked, but Anna suddenly got up from her seat. She went straight to her bag and started rummaging through it. I was curious about her actions, and she unexpectedly pulled out a Tupperware container.
"Can I take this home? I always feel sorry for Mom,"
she said abruptly and began packing the dinner into the Tupperware. As I watched in confusion, Ryan immediately asked her for an explanation.
"What does that mean? Can you tell us?"
he asked gently. Anna, looking downcast, struggled to find the words.
"Mom gets yelled at by Dad for eating. So, she's only allowed to eat leaves."
I was speechless at her unexpected words. What could have happened to Isabel and her family during the time we couldn't see them? Unable to comprehend Anna's words, Ryan quickly stood up. Sensing something, he grabbed his phone and wallet and hurried out of the house.
"Wait! Where are you going?"
I called out, trying to stop him. But Ryan, without changing his expression, picked up Anna and started calling a taxi.
"Hurry up! We need to talk to Michael right now."
We rushed into the taxi that arrived a few minutes later. Ryan, holding my hand tightly, couldn't hide his surprise. To Anna, who was nervously fidgeting, he assured, "It's okay." Taking a deep breath, he looked at Anna.
"Grandpa and Grandma are going to give Mom and Dad a surprise visit. Can Anna help us rescue Mom?"
he asked, gazing directly at her. Anna's eyes lit up, and she nodded. Seeing them, I also took a deep breath and decided to change my mindset. Such a small child should not be sad. I reassured Anna several times that everything would be okay.
"Do you know a spot in the house where we can see inside from the garden? Can you show us?"
Ryan asked kindly. Anna, as if remembering something, nodded strongly.
"I know. I'm good at hide and seek,"
she said confidently, and Ryan hugged her tightly. About an hour later, we arrived at the house and decided to observe from behind the external wall. The lights inside the house were still on, and we could see the living room. Anna, breathing heavily, guided us. Holding our smartphones, we ran to a spot in the garden and hid in the shadows. Anna, seemingly excited about hiding outside, smiled happily. My heart ached seeing her like this, and I hugged her protectively. The spot we hid in faced a small window with a screen. We could clearly see inside the living room, and Ryan quickly prepared his phone. Suddenly, we heard a loud voice yelling from inside. Ryan pointed his phone towards the noise and started recording. It appeared that Michael was yelling at Isabel. I felt the blood drain from my face when I saw Isabel, who looked completely different from before. Her once lustrous hair was now unkempt and messy. Furthermore, she had become extremely thin, her face pale and gaunt. Ryan recorded the scene, his face twisted in anger. Michael's voice echoed outside, and Anna trembled at the sound, which seemed to be a regular occurrence. Our beloved daughter and granddaughter endured such cruelty. I bit my lip in rising anger. Michael's voice grew louder, and at one point, he swung his hand at Isabel. Ryan immediately burst out, yelling at the window. "Stop it! What are you doing?" he shouted, and Michael and Isabel noticed us. "What? Why are you guys here?" Michael began to panic. Seizing the moment, Isabel unlocked the screen door and rushed into my arms. She had become so frail that I hesitated to hug her. "No, it's not like that. There's a reason for this." Michael started making excuses as he realized he was at a disadvantage. Ryan glared at him. "Be quiet. None of that matters now. Our daughter's life is the top priority." Michael lost his words, his face turning pale. I stood protectively in front of the frightened Anna and Isabel. Ryan kept an eye on Michael to ensure he didn't do anything. Soon after, an ambulance arrived, and we watched as Isabel was taken to the hospital. Ryan immediately contacted the police and reported the abuse his daughter had suffered. He provided the video he recorded to the arriving officers. Michael was then arrested on the spot. A search of the house began, and Anna testified that Michael had been physically abusing Isabel regularly. Inside the house, they found Michael's diary, which detailed his regular assaults on Isabel. The diary we found written by Michael contained his dissatisfaction with Isabel not regaining her pre-pregnancy figure after giving birth to Anna. He had been forcing Isabel to follow an extreme diet. He monitored her weight daily, scrutinizing her for not getting back in shape, and took complete control over her meals. Among the diet plans, there was even one that allowed only 3 lettuce leaves a day. That's when I understood what Anna meant when she said they could only eat leaves. Initially, Isabel had resisted and shown defiance to Michael, but when she ate anything outside the diet menu, she was assaulted. Fearful, she started to comply. Michael's diary even mentioned Anna trying to protect Isabel. He had swung his fist at Anna for intervening, and since then, Isabel had stopped resisting. We learned from the police about the extent of their suffering. It was a regret that we could not fully express. According to the police, Michael was deeply remorseful. However, it was clear that he would face prison time for his assault on Isabel and Anna. We held Anna, who was now left alone, tightly in our arms. Later, Isabel and Michael divorced, as all of Michael's actions had come to light and he was prosecuted. In the aftermath, we took care of Isabel, whose health had not yet fully recovered, and she moved in with us. Anna was overjoyed to be living with us permanently. Freed from the daily assaults, Isabel slowly started to regain her health. Her once frail body, nursed back to health, began to look healthier and fuller. "I've caused you and Dad so much trouble," Isabel said, looking remorseful. I shook my head. I never wanted to see her that frail again. Caring for our precious daughter paid off, and she had now fully regained her usual self. To celebrate Isabel's recovery, we laid out a table of dishes, the meal we had missed that day. Anna's eyes sparkled at the sight of the abundant ingredients. "There's so much. We can eat a lot." "Yes, it's wonderful to be able to eat to our heart's content," Isabel added, happily eating her meal. Watching them, we wished for this peaceful life to continue forever.